a lot of people talk about Bitcoin, but few people seem to understand that it is not just a technology, right? That's a very obvious thing that Bitcoin is. It's this new digital money. But there's also this social dimension to Bitcoin, or what a lot of people call the social layer, where we are actually components of the Bitcoin system, human beings. And as it turns out, when you really kind of get into the rabbit hole, we're actually core operating components of the Bitcoin system. Like it works on us as much as it works through us. Why do you, I guess, how would you define it? First of all, does that make sense the way I'm describing it? Mm-hmm. And why do you consider the Bitcoin social layer to be such an undervalued aspect of Bitcoin?
Yeah, I think that is kind of the way I describe it. I say we are focused on, there's the technological layer, there's cultural layer, there's even ideological layer, but the social layer is made up of both us as individuals and then the relationships that we form with other individuals within the network. So when we're meeting in meetups, when we're connecting on Twitter, developing relationships over podcasts, that's basically what the Bitcoin social layer is. And I think the reason why it's the undervalued part of Bitcoin is because those relationships are gaining in power and in importance over time. As the Bitcoin network grows, the more influential, the more capable those relationships can become of creating real life value and creating and generating beauty, generating positive experiences, and just what our society is made up of.
Yeah, there's so as Bitcoin continues to succeed, obviously all of the people that hold Bitcoin then have more purchasing power. They are more wealthy. They can bring more capital to bear on any given situation. They can invest more in different projects to try and solve different customer problems. But if I hear you correctly, there's another side to this too. It's that those individuals that have been interacting inside of Bitcoin, social media, events, other more focused retreats, et cetera, which obviously you're doing some of this and we'll talk about later. Those relationships can pay more dividends, so to speak, right? That, more opportunities to start even more businesses, raise more capital, do more things, move the world, put a positive dent in the universe, so to speak.
Right.
And so the social layer of Bitcoin is not just then, because and so I guess I should say this, it's usually the protocol broken down into the protocol layer and the social layer. The protocol layer being kind of like the hardware and the energy that's being allocated into executing the rules basically of the Bitcoin network. Sure. The social layer, which are the actual nodes, people operating their own nodes, are choosing the rules that the protocol layer executes. And so that feedback loop is what makes Bitcoin work, right? So people often say, oh, well, if Bitcoin's just open source software, let me just copy paste it and poof, 21 million Bitcoin obliterated. I just printed 21 million more. And so, but that critique betrays an ignorance of the social layer. And the analogy you often hear here is, well, you can fork the rules of chess, but no one's going to play with you, right? So it's like whatever the social consensus is on in terms of a rule set, that is what defines Bitcoin. The protocol layer really just becomes the enforcement mechanism for that.
Right.
So there's that where it's like, okay, the social layer is part of Bitcoin, but it's also and this is what's so weird about Bitcoin, it's also operating within us, right? The people that actually adopt these principles, live by Bitcoin, live, breathe, and eat Bitcoin, can't shut up about Bitcoin. They actually create relationships in the real world that let them be more effective at various projects that require higher degrees of cooperation, coordination, etc. So so we're working inside of Bitcoin, but Bitcoin's also working inside of us, and this is probably why it's such a weird thing to talk about oftentimes.
Yeah, and there's also a real sense in which we, throughout time, like the any way that any company, any human organization that's ever occurred, always the most important aspect of that is the people who are involved. And so if you're undertaking any kind of project, if you're building a podcast, if you're building a business, the most important aspect of that is who is going to be involved with that project. And so that's, I think, what you're discovering, or what we're discovering in building out Bitcoin companies, building out, attempting to spur Bitcoin adoption in various areas, is like who you're doing things with is always the most, the key part. And a lot of us who come to understand Bitcoin and understand its importance in what's going on in the world right now are looking at, we want to create businesses, we want to create value and preserve, build wealth for our families and provide value for other people. But the people we want to do those things with are pretty much only Bitcoiners, people who understand and are enthusiastic about this new monetary asset, which is one way to describe it. But yeah, it's this fascinating thing where Bitcoiners go deep down the rabbit hole, and then I think maybe it's part of that process as well, where you're going down this journey of understanding, and you can feel like you're very alone in that process, because if you are a lone coiner out just kind of learning about this thing on the internet, and you're reading these articles and gaining this understanding of like what's wrong with the central banking system, what's wrong with the corporatocracy, how everything is corrupt, how everything is a scam. You're like, no one else in my circle believes this. No one else in my circle even sees this reality that I'm seeing right here. And then you find Bitcoin Twitter, or you go to a meetup and you're talking to someone, you're like, you see that too?
Yeah.
I saw that too. Yeah. I'm not necessarily the crazy one.
Yeah.
The world is kind of crazy right now, but we're kind of like seeking truth and kind of finding each other.
Yes.
In this way.
Thanks for watching. If you enjoyed this episode, click here to find more just like it, and here to find our most recent episode. Also, make sure to like this video to help shine light on the corruption of money, and be sure to subscribe to this channel to stay connected.